be in this space. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of different vantage points around police accountability represented by our speakers, but also focusing on how do we transform our current justice system so it doesn't benefit those people who benefit from oppression, but speaks directly to those who are directly impacted by police violence, right? We talked about the fact that, saying it's important that we are always making space for people who are directly accountable to. So it's fitting that we started, saying with some exchanges amongst the people. But that's going to be a theme that we bring up a lot, right? So today, does anybody know what today is the 50th anniversary of? Selma. Okay. So for those people who may not know, today specifically, 50 years ago, was the first day of the assembling of the march from Selma to Montgomery. It's always important that we bring our history and those people who offered up their lives and shown courage into our spaces, right? Specifically, we saw that a lot of our folks down in Selma and supporters that had gone down were attacked, right, saying by the police. They went out there pretty much to be able to march, saying for voting rights, but also for the right to be represented and to exist. And we saw that they were met, with a lot of police violence, as was caused, was asked by Governor, George Wallace and Sheriff Jim Clark, right? If you look at those pictures, and also have seen a lot of the visuals that we've seen for some of the more recent, saying uprisings, but maybe the difference between quality of camera, you probably see a lot of the same things, right? Similar responses, right? We've seen even now, right, as our people have been able to show coverage led by the families who are directly impacted, led by the voices who are continue to be marginalized within our communities, our young people, right, our women, those who are queer and trans, homeless, Muslim, Asians, anybody who else is marginalized. We understand that not only have we seen courage and creativity being able to show, but we've also seen the NYPD respond to that, right, with proposals for 1,000 new cops. Right? We've seen as recently as this last week, saying where the NYPD has the ability to mass arrest without any prior notice, even if you do have a permit. So we understand as we're getting stronger as a movement, and as we're getting stronger and being more clear around what that justice agenda looks like, there's still a commitment to broken windows theory that we know and has been proven that it causes death and the continued traumatization of our community. So today we're going to be focusing on the importance of keeping that justice agenda in our mind, but also understanding and really lifting up, as we saw in Selma, that the roles within our movement and the vantage point that are represented through those roles are key and are necessary. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to get into a brief introduction of our speakers, and then I'm going to give the floor for them to get a little bit deeper into the work that they're doing. So first, to my left, we have Damon Jones, who is the New York representative for Blacks in Law Enforcement. Give it up for my brother. Next, we have Monifa Bandele, who is the campaign director for MomsRising.org, an activist with the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and one of the steering committee members for Communities Policing, or Communities United for Policing. To keep it going with the praise, we have Councilmember Jamani Williams, who's the representative from the 45th Council District in BK, and also one of the lead sponsors of the Community Safety Act, which we'll be hearing a little bit more about today. Last but not least, I alluded to the fact that it's really the courage of a lot of our family members who've lost their lives, who've lost their family, that have really been giving us a lot of inspiration. So it's truly the blessing to be in the presence of Erica Garner, activist and daughter of Eric Garner, and also a leader within the Garner Way Foundation. So let's give a lot of Erica, if we can start with you. Just have a couple brief statements about the work, saying that you're involved in. Mic check.
The type of work that I do, ever since, the incident with my father, I've been protesting and fighting for justice for my dad. I started the Gardner Way Foundation, which focused on social justice, the youth, and focus on, social justice, political, just reaching out, awareness for the community.
Expand a little bit more on the protest that you will be doing.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, I do a protest in Staten Island at 6 o'clock. Basically, what we do is we rally, we protest and march and do a die-in at the site my father was killed in. And we say a weekly prayer twice a week.
Thank you. Just a quick note, we're going to be talking about a few different points of reflection, but there's also going to be a lot of concrete ways that you can directly support as well. I just want you to be extra mindful of that, right? We're going to be building a lot of energy, but we can also use that energy towards action after this, right? So the protest that we're seeing, that's a direct opportunity as coming from the families for us to be able to support, okay?
Good evening, everybody. How you doing?
Good.
All right. Do I need a mic? I got a big mouth.
I think it's there.
What is your streaming? All right, good evening, streamers. As mentioned, my name is Jamani Williams, Councilman for the 45th District. Very honored to be on this panel. I'm particularly honored to be here with Erica Garner, who took her tragedy and has not retreated, but has come back even harder and tried to push back. And so most people know what the work of a council member does and is. For those who don't, 51 of us were supposed to be a counterweight to the mayor. When it comes to resources, we passed it's going to be $77 billion budget, the fourth largest in the country, and help pass laws. I've tried to bring a different sense to the seat. I come from the organizing world and activism world, and that is the kind of mentality that I brought or tried to bring to my seat. It's been exciting because there have been more people coming from that world. Usually people come from attorneys and legal work and corporations, but we have a group of folks that are coming from the community, and that dynamic has changed quite a bit, which is exciting. We have a long way to go. So some of the things that I focus on, I'm now the chair of housing and buildings, but most of what I'm known for was police reform work and gun violence. I actually do more work on gun violence, but that stuff doesn't make the news. It's not as sexy. But I really am hoping that we can change the way we talk about public safety. For too often, it's just police who are responsible for law enforcement, but they can't be responsible for public safety. And so I've really tried to see if we can do things, fund programs that broaden out public safety, who's responsible for public safety. And so I'm hoping, at least by the end of my tenure, a lot of that will change, and that police officers will look at the job they're supposed to do much different. And the first thing to respond to a broken window is not an arrest. Maybe it's a carpenter, maybe it's someone to fix the windows. And really change the way we think about how we do this. And so I guess
Good afternoon. I'm really honored to be here. So thank you so much, Julian, and all of the organizers of the conference for putting this on, but also making sure that there's a space for our community organizers to not only talk about our work, but help funnel people into that work, and that's always a privilege. The Malcolm X grassroots movement has been working on police brutality really since the mid-90s as part of a coalition called CAPB, Coalition Against Police Brutality. And a lot of us at the time, college students, brought together by Richie Perez, who is a legendary activist in this field, who's a former Young Lord, and really had a vision of bringing together people who were in public advocacy, litigators, organizers, and elected officials, and come at the issue of police brutality through this kind of multi-layered campaign. And that was like really the birth of a lot of the stuff that we're doing today. I talk about the mid-90s and point that out because at that time there was another extremely infamous chokehold case, which was the strangling of Anthony Baez in the Bronx. And it's almost eerie when you think about the fact that Anthony Baez's mother, Iris Baez, still also goes on the anniversary of that event to the place where her son died, and also does a prayer and also does a vigil. And so it's almost like there's lights, there's like candles lighting up all over the city where vigils are being held, where we're losing members of our communities. And still we push on, and still those families push on as their ranks swell. so many families. And so what we do in the Malcolm X grassroots movement, under the leadership of another great organization called Justice Committee, is really work to support those families. Those families know best what they need and what they want in order to achieve justice. And the people in the communities that are dealing with police brutality day in and day out are the ones that have to really define what safety looks like. It can't be defined in the halls of the city council. You know, it can't be defined in the governor's office. If you tell me that I'm going to be safe, I have to define what that looks like and what that feels like. And so we're very committed to that model of organizing and making sure that that piece is always in the space. And so how that work looks is that we've been doing something called Cop Watch since actually the late 90s when Amadou Diallo was shot and killed in the Bronx. You know, I open up to all of you. You know, Julie and I were having a conversation earlier about the Cop Watch patrols happening here in Harlem. We do one in Central Brooklyn. If you can't join an existing patrol, you can come to one of the many organizations that are a part of the Cop Watch Alliance. JFridge is an organization that can train you on how to do Cop Watch. And we also do Know Your Rights workshops. And these are very important pieces so that when it comes time that we have champion legislators who are putting forth pieces like the Community Safety Act that Jumani was talking about that he did back in 2012, 2013, then you have built the public will and people are connecting what they're doing, what they're seeing in the street to what can happen in City Hall. Those things can't happen in two different silos. They have to be working together. Finally, I want to say that today, this year, it's 2015, we have another piece of legislation that organizers are supporting along with elected officials and advocates, which is the Right to Know Act. If you're unfamiliar with that, that's two pieces of legislation that one requires police officers when they've interacted with our young people or anyone in our community to actually identify themselves. You know, it's very difficult when your child comes home. I work with Moms Rising and they get this complaint a lot, and they have a situation that happened, but they have no idea who stopped them, who they were talking to. You know, there's no business card. There's no something that they can say, this is the person I was dealing with, Mom. This is what happened. And so we see a lot of complaints that go in from families. They can't attach anything to a particular officer. So one is police ID bill, and the second piece is consent to search. Right now, if a police officer wants to search you and they don't have probable cause, they're supposed to ask you if they can search you.
Right.
But people don't know that. So what we would like to do, similar to what happens with your Miranda laws, like you have a right to remain silent, is just to have the police officer articulate to you that if they don't have probable cause, that they have to tell you that you have a right to deny the search, or that they have to ask you and you have to give your consent. So those are the two pieces that we'd like you to support, as well as Cop Watch. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to come before you representing a black law enforcement organization. A lot of times we are left out of the conversation. When you look at the news and they talk about police and community relations with the community of color, is usually a white retired police officer discussing issues in the black communities, Latino communities. We are always left out. Not that we do not have a voice. Black law enforcement organizations have been in existence since the 60s. We grew out of the Black Power and the Civil Rights Movement. We recognize our blackness before our blueness. Now, you would say, well, I've been treated bad by black cops. Yes, there are those that fall victim to the culture of policing. See, a black law enforcement officer is only 4 degrees of separation for what happens in his community. He either knows the victim, knows somebody that knows the victim is a family member, and a lot of times we are the victim. In New York State, black cops, off duty or on duty, have been shot at their white counterparts 27 times, but this incident has never happened in the reverse, where you find a black cop shooting at a white plainclothes officer. Never happened in the reverse. So we understand the perceptions of the black male in law enforcement. We understand the history of law enforcement. Law enforcement was created over the oppression of black people. the patrollers enforced the slave codes and the black codes in the South. And it evolved into what you see as your modern day police force. Stop and frisk. Stop and frisk was created from the slave codes and the black codes. How many people saw 12 Years a Slave? Raise your hand. How many people remember the part when when she sent him to the store and he was stopped by the patrollers? And what did they do? They questioned him. Boy, where you going? They checked his ID. His ID was the chain around his neck to identify him to the slave master. And they saw that his papers was good. He let him go. But what happened to the brothers whose papers wasn't good? They were killed. That's what you call stop and frisk. That's what you call broken windows today. See, we have to understand the history and where we at. Black and Latino people, poor people, are the only communities in the United States that have no say-so in how their communities are policed. They have no say-so. Police departments tell them how their communities will police, and they are the taxpayers. We should not focus on Ferguson. Yes, Ferguson was a tragedy. They say, well, they only had 50 cops, and he had 3 black cops. Well, I could take you right up here to Yonkers, New York. 430 cops, and only 30 black cops. I could take you to Mount Vernon. 225 cops, 50 black cops, and the population is 90% black. So we don't have to look at Ferguson. We have Fergusons right here in New York. But the question is, what are we going to do about it? As law enforcement, we give our recommendations because we live in the culture as black law enforcement. We see the racism inside, and we also feel the racism when we're not in uniform. I could stand with the white cop at roll call, and I could see him in the bank on my day off, and he wouldn't even recognize me. So we understand what racism is, like everybody else understands what racism is. But it has to be accountability when police officers cross the line. We have to change our language, not from police brutality, but to police criminality, because what these officers are doing is a crime. Brutality is just being brutalized. But we must start saying it's police criminality, because they are supposed to be the trained professionals. They're supposed to be trained professionals, and they're trained by the state. They're trained by your tax dollars. So what happens when they break those rules and regulations in their training? Nothing. Because we haven't pushed the legislation to create a crime. It should be a crime when they abuse the people that pay their salaries and their pension. It should be a crime. So we have to look at legislation to move forward with that. So as I end, only thing I'm saying is we must take this opportunity to have positive dialogue and move forward to march, to bring awareness, and to push to change legislation so these things that the police officers are doing to our children become a crime.
So I think all of you, spoke to this, what you've been hearing, saying based on the nature of the impact of the folks that you're accountable to, right? We've also talked about how do we link our condition not only to our history and understanding the presence of racism, saying sexism, homophobia, transphobia in our work, but also how do we also look at how do we redefine a lot of the concepts, saying that we are being pushed by our current system. So whoever wants to start, I just want to get into how are those that you are accountable to define justice, right? And how do you keep that central in the work that you're doing as an organizer, since a black law enforcement council member, and obviously somebody who's directly impacted by police work. Anybody who wants to start off?
I'll start. Well, my wife is, I live in Mount Vernon. My wife is also a detective. She's born and raised in the city. So, as law enforcement officers, your first thing, you want to protect the city that you live because you know the people. Well, we have seen that, I don't know how old some people are, but they used to have a program called Officer Friendly. Yeah. See, all the older people are smiling because they remember Officer Friendly. Officer Friendly was the cop that was, well, it was officer, they used to call in Westchester Officer Friendly. Officer Friendly was that officer that lived in the community. Now police don't live in the community that they serve. They're not stakeholders. They're not stakeholders anymore. I can see the difference in my wife and how she treats people to how other law enforcement officers that do not live in the cities that they serve treat people. So being in law enforcement and being accountable to the people, you must have respect for the people first. I'm in corrections. I call the inmate's brother. Hey brother, what are you doing over there? Or this and that. I don't call him inmate. I give him the opportunity. You want me to treat you like a man? Or you want me to treat you like an inmate? You have the option. You have the option. Because this is a job. This is a job that pays my bills, but also I come from the community that I see locked up. And I've been in there 25 years, and I'm telling you right now, there's no correction in correction. It's capitalism. It's straight up capitalism. So we must work as law enforcement to address the issues, because it could always one day be my son. Matter of fact, it was my son. So we must work to change the system. We must work to address the false pretense of community policing. You cannot have community policing if the community is dying of poor educational system, lack of jobs, no economic development. How they talking about broken windows? They say, well, you would fix the broken window. Well, first you got to have a job to fix the broken window. First you have to have proper education to get a job, to get a good job, to get a mortgage, so you can fix the broken window that you own on the house. See, they don't talk about that. You cannot arrest away this problem. This is not a policing problem that we see in our community. It's a social problem. See, they want to cover it with the crime so they can get more government funds. But it's a social problem. Well, we need to address the educational system. We need to address the lack of job development. We need to address a livable wage. These are the things that we need to address in our communities, instead of just harassing people that's just trying to make some money to feed their family, because the institutions have failed them. And that's what it's all about. So to be accountable is, as law enforcement, is to continue to speak out on that, because we know that the setting of law enforcement the way it is today is not correct, but it's all for capitalism. It's all to keep black people in jail. We got to be honest about it. And I know y'all probably never heard no black law enforcement officer talk like this, but it's the reality. It's the reality in what we see and what it is. And until we be honest about it, and then once again put out agenda to change it.
What makes it more essential in my work and what I'm trying to do now, and I agree to what Damon said, with the community policing and educating our community. That's part of what I'm trying to push in my foundation, to give kids the opportunity to have their voice heard and be a part of the community in the right way. So going back to the community policing, I believe that instead of police officers from outside or police officers just coming into the neighborhood and basically bullying us, I think that it should be like mentors or leaders out there that's willing to say, hey, go to school, hey, don't stand in front of this store, go to this community center. Like, I want to provide a way to give kids an outlet, because from 3 o'clock to about 10 o'clock, those are the most crucial times for kids, because they don't have nowhere to go after school. And that's when they get in most trouble. So I think, by building these centers and giving them a way to educate themselves, explore their talents, give them a chance to become leaders, and educate them on their rights, their human rights, laws, keep them up on current events such as like the news, also becoming journalists themselves to be their own social media outlet, because the media, sometimes they portray lies and sometimes they tell the truth, but that's the truth. They want you to know, what they want, whatever story they're trying to put out there. But I think if people from the community start being their own, media and get the word around, just like social media, Facebook, Twitter, just to try to build something, a platform from these young people. And I think it's very essential in fighting for justice, because a lot of these kids wants to be heard and they have fresh ideas. And, some of the things that happened in the past, it's still going on now. So we need fresh ideas and fresh, ideas such as, it's already laws in place, but I think, they need to be either enforced or a little reformed. So, yeah.
So I think the question was how do those who hold me accountable define justice? I never polled them, but I would try to get called from conversations. Obviously, sameness, equity, and I heard someone on another panel say, particularly with police, do no harm. And I think that's a mantra that I don't think is followed in police departments. I think there is a lot of harm being done, but not just in the police department, but agencies across the board do a lot of harm to these communities. And I think it's about, and how I keep it central in the work that I do, my thing is I always look at if it's an event that happened, if an incident that happened, a community, if I was to take the same set of circumstances and just change the color of the skin, would it be a different result? And if the answer is yes, then we have a problem. And that's usually what it boils down to, whether it's a police officer shooting someone unarmed, whether it's housing being redlined in a certain area, whether it's someone not getting a job. If I can change one thing and it will be different, then things are wrong. There's no justice there. And that's what we have to correct. It's hard to correct that, though, when people won't admit that that problem exists. So it's hard to get rid of racism when I got to first convince you that it exists. Like, it's the craziest conversation. I don't even understand how I got to tell you that it exists. I don't even know what to do right now. We have to waste time on that conversation when we should be figuring out how to fix the problem. So for me, it's just sameness. And so I have people who actually ask for additional officers, at the same time ask that those officers be held accountable, and at the same time are worried that those same officers are going to violate their children. And other people don't have to have these thoughts in their head. Other people don't have to have these conversations that my mother had with me and gave me the little black book so I can survive police interaction. So when those things are not happening, that's what the justice is. They want everything to be equal. Either you should be having that conversation, or I shouldn't be having that conversation. But the fact that one of us do and the other one don't is a definite problem. So I try to keep that in all the work that I do. That all I'm trying to do is equalize the situation. I'm not even trying to get a leg up. I'm just trying to catch up to where you are. And I'm just trying to get the community to catch up to where you are, because these communities have been neglected for a very long time, intentionally.
The question for me, what does justice look like for me based on those who hold me accountable, is complicated, because some of those people are ancestors, and there's many layers and levels of accountability that we have in our work as community organizers, right? But when I think about that question, the first thing that popped in my mind was Angela Davis's quote, "No more prisons." And really trying to focus in on this idea that there's an overemphasis on repairing broken people when there are broken systems.
Right.
And how does safety, Jemani talked on this earlier, what is really safety? Is safety that I have to have someone who is armed patrol me and my community? Is that really what safety looks like? Is that really what justice looks like? And time again, when you really pose that question, you ask people, they say no. So my answer to it is like the no more prisons answer, which is that, and this is a long term, this is a marathon, right? Not a sprint. Our grandparents always say, is that we have to be striving to create communities where the police are not necessary, with all due respect. I know you already
I'm
said.
correction. We're gonna correct.
And where corrections and where prisons are no longer necessary.
That's right.
Because we really understand that at the root of what's going on is not a lack of quote unquote law enforcement. It has to do with good jobs. It has to do with education. It has to do with housing.
That's right.
You know, it has to do with all of the things that people need to live healthy and whole lives, right?
That's right.
So justice for us and justice for me looks like working towards that. Do I want Francis Lavoti to see his day in court and to really go to prison for choking Anthony Myers? Of course, right? But there's a system that creates Francis Lavotis. There's a system that perpetuates Francis Lavotis, right? I want to see the dismantling of that system. I want to see that system face its day in court and be reformed and be corrected. That's what justice is.
I think a few of you alluded to it, just, saying the frustration, dealing with how much evidence, whether it's using, the system's own numbers, right, that they're generating to show that their system is not only not working, right, but it's also devaluing their real experiences, saying with the people that we know and that we care about, right? Erica, you alluded, saying to the media, saying giving a little bit of truth, but always being up in your face with that camera because they want to be able to pull a story, right? So being able to pull that in, we're seeing recently, with Eric Holder's statements around how DOJ, found Ferguson's, police department to be able to use bias practices, but yet in the same statement says that they can't, say they didn't find anything wrong with Darren Wilson's, killing of Michael Brown, right? And that there's 8 people who've been killed since, who a lot of those names we don't even know, right? Even closer to home, we have Bill Bratton, who continuously says that I want to be able to build community relations, I want to build trust, but is still relying on his love of broken windows, right? Incentivizing officers. They're going to continue to create this. But we know that this work is hard work. And anybody who's in this room and who's on that screen out there, saying, we know that this is hard work. So given that current climate, right, how has that been showing up, saying in the work, saying that you do, right? How does that impact, saying the work that you do when we know we have a long-term vision, but you also have to deal with the constant frustration, saying getting people, saying to recognize that our issues are real. So we actually can start with you, Erica, and then we'll work our way down.
Well, it's been very essential and part of the work that I'm doing. It makes it kind of hard to try to, get people to stay with one mindset and to stay positive and nonviolent, with Bill Bratton coming out with these numbers of more cops and to see that protesters is being inclined with the same as terrorists, that was really hurtful towards the peaceful movement that we're trying to press on because, we out here, we marching, we fighting for justice, we in the streets or whatever the case may be, but we doing it peacefully. And to have more cops come and with these big guns, it's like, I feel like it's a form of intimidation to say that, we have these big guns, it's nothing that you can do about it as people. But, and another thing is, it's just so much going on, all these kids being killed, all these people being killed, women, children, it doesn't make no sense, and cops keep on getting away with it. And for the Justice Department to say, we didn't find nothing wrong with Darren Wilson or with my father, and then, Darren Wilson, in the Department of Justice, to find that bias still exists in police departments. I mean, it should be looked at as an eye-opener towards the whole country, everything. It doesn't happen in just one area, it doesn't happen in just one state. I mean, people reached out for me from different countries, different nations around the world about police and what's going on. So I don't think, like, it is, does have to do with race, but it's also brutality. They using too much force, too much. They have too much, and I think a way for us to actually have hard data or actually have investigation when these things happen. I think the civilian complaint board, review board is very essential because, they don't never get nowhere. They do these investigations on the police department or whatever, and, it get thrown out or overlooked. So part of what I'm trying to like fight for is, to get them to have more power over the prosecutor's office and the police the police station, to have like, if you mess up or if you do this, you're going to be treated just like a criminal. You don't have that, 72-hour hold from getting questioned or investigated. I think that would be, a long-term goal, something that, we should look forward to, not only made up of civilians, but the board should be made up of politicians, other prosecutors, other people in courts, former judges, something to, powerful people that know what's right and what's wrong to say, officer, you did this wrong, this is your time, that's it, all this other. I think that will move towards change.
So two things for me that it's always frustrating as in the climate that we're in. One, I just get so concerned that we focus not on the wrong thing, but the small thing. So like a year or so ago, we were really focused on stop, question, and frisk. And we had some victories there. Now we're focused on broken windows. And I'm sure we'll have victories there. And then we'll be focused on whatever they call the next policing model that comes after it.
Right.
And that's because the entire thing is broken.
Right.
So if you don't fix the structure, whatever the best idea you outlay on that structure is going to be faulty.
That's right.
And so for me, it's okay, how do we do those things at the same time? And so I get concerned because I know people are focused on the broken window, and I'm like, yo, but the whole thing is messed up. The whole thing is broken. We're going to win that, and then they're going to put something else, call it ABC, and it's still going to be black and brown people who are going to feel the brunt of all the problems. And so it's how do you try to really get to that systemic thing at the same time, fighting those battles that keep coming to you. And I think it's my job as a councilman to try in the halls of the city council and the halls of government, try to find hope for the people I represent and get a path to that. So I always have hope in this mayor, and I have hope in the commissioner that we can get where we need to go. But my faith is not as strong as the hope because they fail to admit certain things. So the commission won't admit the systemic racism that NYPD has been problematic and emblematic. So I don't know how you get to the result that you want to see and say you want corrected when you won't admit what the real problem is. So that is also a frustration to me. But then again, sometimes you see why people are afraid. The mayor mentioned a conversation he has with his son that all black parents have with their children, and all black officers that I know have with their children. And the whole city act like he said something crazy. Like they were about to rip apart the city for an honest conversation that he has. But we have to be brave, and we have to continue to push forward, because until we have that real conversation, that real admission, then we're not going to get the result that we want. And the second part that troubles me when I hear the conversation is that it's solely focused on police. And I understand why, because it's the most palpable thing. And because they have the power to immediately right then and there destroy you or not destroy you. But there's brutality in all of the systems. And so my hope is to see somehow that conversation expand to the real problems that someone alluded to. You need the police because we haven't fixed those problems. So these communities are being brutalized by not having proper education. I'm not even talking about what's being taught in the school. I'm talking about the damn building. The building is falling apart. They don't have the proper books. unless you're in the charter school, that's a whole nother conversation. The housing, they're being, so I always, the thing that people scream about police, like those communities, and I said this before, those communities ask for more police, that's why we're sending more police. But those same communities ask for better housing conditions, they ask for better education, they ask for livable wages, they ask for their streets to be swept the same way that other people's streets are swept. And we don't hear those other calls. And so I get worried that we have to focus on the policing issue, but we got to bring that other stuff in, that historical racism that those communities have been, the problem is, and this country is operating the way it's supposed to operate. It was set up to operate like this. And so everybody acts surprised when white males are the ones that benefit, particularly rich white males, because that's how it was set up. So I don't understand why we're surprised that that is still happening now. And so if the forefathers woke up, they just might wonder what went wrong, because black people are voting, women are voting, you have black presidents. Something's wrong. That's not what we set up for this country to do. So we're pushing against a construct. And if we won't even admit that that's what we're doing, it makes it harder. And I don't say those things to bash anybody. I say as a matter of factly, like, okay, this thing is blue, I want it to be red. We got to do something with that. But if I won't say it's blue, I don't even fix the damn thing that we got to fix. And so it was Condoleezza Rice, of all people, I was listening, she said the country has a birth defect in slavery. And we are feeling that birth defect continually until now. People remember not having the right to vote. Like, this is not a history lesson. This is people remember that. And so we're still fighting these things, but it's based on a construct that was set up to be there and is working. And so I get worried that if we focus only on the police thing, we're going to miss the boat, because if we fix the police thing, which we should, and don't fix those other things, we're going to be repeating cycles.
My feeling about the DOJ report is that we have to get to a conversation about building power.
Yes.
And that everything that is going on that's outlined in that report speaks to a lack of power. And police brutality, while many years, a lot of us talk about it as being the effect of a lack of power, I really have come to believe that police brutality is actually the cause of the many, many decades of us building power. It's the pushback. So if you look at what happened 50 years ago in Selma, what sparked the big spark of that movement was an incident of police brutality. It was when one of the voting rights protesters was hunted down and shot and killed, Jiggly Jackson.
That's right.
By Alabama State Trooper.
That's right.
And it took until 2007 for that police officer to be arrested, indicted, and convicted for manslaughter and served 6 months, but that's a whole nother piece. But he was literally hunted down and executed for protesting. And that and the reason why he was chased down and hunted down and shot for protesting was to push back on the power that was being built in the movement that he was linked to, in addition to the fact that he was a black man. And so if we think about everything that Jumani just said, and also look at what's happening with police brutality as not just, a result of, this victim blaming, we're not doing it right, we've got to fix our communities, we've got to repair our schools. That's all true. That has to happen. But that is what we're doing. That's what we're always doing. And then there's this pushback because there is power, right? And so power has to be conceded at some point. And we have to keep the conversation, at least the internal conversation, focused on how we continue to build our movement, how we continue to organize. No one's surprised at what came out in the DOJ's report. If any of us have traveled, especially to what we call the black burbs, right? In any black suburb in America looks like Mount Vernon, looks like Ferguson.
That's right.
I mean, it's just you can go in Dallas. It's called DeSoto. It's these places where people are in the city, you get pushed out of the city, you build up in there, and it's this. But the power is not there, even when you go out and build a home and make a place like it's laid out, the blueprint. So I think this is about power, and I think that everybody in the room, most of the people in the room are doing the right thing by being in those places where they're organizing. We always say, you know, stay in your lane. If you're a police officer, organize with other police officers. If you live on a block, be in your tenant associations. Teachers have to organize. But this is about building power. And really, yes, looking out beyond the issue of police brutality. Because again, that's the pushback.
Right.
Because you got to keep building power. Because all of the laws and all of the systems can be in place that say on paper that there should be a certain outcome, but if you can't hold those systems accountable because your community lacks power, it doesn't matter what's said on a piece of paper. And that's what's happening.
I just want to follow what Sister was saying with the power. And let's not be fooled because we claim that we are Democrats. I know, not this brother here, but you know. Good, you know, I mean, let's not be fooled with that. Black and brown people, 70% of de Blasio's total vote. He won on police reform. He won speaking about police reform. But the first thing he did was put Bratton. Nothing will change because Bratton is one of the co-conspirators on why policing it is today in New York City. Let's not make any mistake. There's no beef between Bratton and Lynch. They're two sides of the same coin. Lynch was saying what Bratton couldn't say. Understand what I'm saying here. Understand what I'm saying here. Understand the message that Lynch said after they had the private meeting with Bratton. His problem wasn't with Bratton. It was with, basically he was saying it was with the mayor with the nigger kids. That's what he was saying. See, any time that you will get law enforcement, not just from New York City, but law enforcement at a funeral from all over the country will turn their back on a mayor that was concerned about his black son. We got to understand what we're looking at. Michelle Alexander, she spoke here last night. Her book went through over 30 to 40 years of legislation that was passed that adversely affected black and brown people in the United States. Wasn't no pushback. We had black and Latino mayors, we had black and Latino judges, we had black and Latino police commissioners, so on, lieutenants, so on and so on, and none of them pushed back. Over the years, all these laws were passed. There wasn't any pushback. So this is nothing new. What makes it new is this, a cell phone. That we can record it, put it up on social media, and the whole world can see it now. We didn't have this when I started in 1990. The phones were about that big. But police crimes against people of color was still going on back then. Nobody believed it. There wasn't a CCRB. There wasn't things that were in place where people can file a police complaint. So what is occurring is not new. What's new is that the world is seeing it.
I'm sorry, can I say one thing?
Yes, sir,
It's
brother.
important what he said, particularly about Democrats and the electeds. You put me in there, I have no problem with that. Because there's certain things that I understand somewhat why they happen in other places. I don't understand why they happen in New York City. There are certain things that should not be allowed to be here because we have so many black and brown elected officials, so many black and brown people who have seats of power that can make the changes and don't.
You know
Now,
what?
battle with stop, question, and frisk should have never taken that long. And I feel it's because some of us think the seat we hold is more important than the people we serve. And also, we have to stop re-electing people who are not doing the thing that we want them to do. And we do that as well. But if there's one place that foolishness should not be happening, is in New York City, and that is one of the height of my frustrations, because we do have a lot of power, community organizing and political power, and the crap continues to happen.
So, I had, one of the things that I've been hearing, and I think, you mentioned it when you first, is the importance of, saying heeding, saying the energy of our ancestors, and also understanding that we have the benefit of those lessons. I think, Jamani, you had also started to get into it, just around self-evaluation. And in our movement, we always need to be able to look at it from a point of humility. There's always more work that we can be doing. There's always voices that we can continue to listen to. But I also know we have a lot of powerful voices in the crowd, so I wanted to be able to bring, maybe some points around reflections and improvement into the closing remarks. But if we can open up questions, to the space, just so we can hear more questions that are. If you want to offer up any comments, make them brief. But if you have questions, you can do that anytime. No. Finish my answer. You can go to the mic. We're going to take questions 3 at a time, just so we can allow for more exchange, because we don't want to just be talking at folks. Okay? So if you have questions, you can go up to the mic. We're going to take them 3 at a time. Panelists, please respond to them as you see fit, and if we can just try to be succinct, just so we can make sure that we honor people's time. All right? So if you have questions, feel free, to go to the microphone. Special attention on being brief and succinct. No subs.
Good evening.
Yes, please, brother.
My name is Rodney Johnson. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm happy to get all these wonderful insights from these brilliant people. I have 2 questions. One is for the correction officer, organization guy.
That's close enough.
You actually mentioned that, you guys are actually doing a lot of good things, but most people don't know about you guys.
Right.
So my first question is, what are you guys doing to change that? To improve the communication between the organization and the community? Because I didn't know about what you guys are doing.
Right.
Right. So that's one. And the second question is, what are some of the mechanisms that you guys have in place to kind of like hold these officers of color accountable to some of the stuff that goes on, against their community?
Quick point of process. So for the second question, is that to?
Yeah, it's for him. Yeah.
Okay.
I have one for him, and then the next one is for the city councilman.
Well, that was the second question, right?
He's 21 actually.
No. We're gonna represent the principles, that we're talking about our movement and open up some space. So I'm gonna acknowledge the first 2 questions. That's cool, and then we're gonna get one, and then we're gonna get to the speakers.
Was I going to ask? Oh.
Yeah. Now offer your 3rd question, and then we'll get into it.
All right, real quick, I just wanted to kind of make a remark and just one question. Yeah, it's going to be short. I'm just going to read it out so it'll be faster. It's basically dealing with 1,000 new cops. And as an activist in the community, I find that very disturbing to even consider adding 1,000 new cops, especially every time there seems to be a problem with police officers killing and hurting somebody, they get more, but when the community, that is affected, something happened within the community or violence within the community happening, they get less. So that's something that we have to wonder. So 1,000 more cops, right, cost somewhere between 90 to 120 million for the fiscal year 2016, which is if it's added, which does not include the commitment of funds in the future year, which is going to cost many more $1 million. Now, the new political buzzword, which is not new, or in fact, community policing is being repeated by elected and law enforcement authorities to make people feel more comfortable with the department looking to escape continued scrutiny. In the reality, a police department run by Bill Bryant, supported by a mayor that continually defends broken window, is hardly on its way to reform. Additionally, the NYPD is by far the largest police force in America, with one of the highest national police to citizen ratio. Now, since Jamani Williams is here, that's right. Now, since Jamani Williams is here, and he has also had, along together with Council Member, the Speaker, Melissa Riverito, supporting this bill, I would like to elaborate why would he support a bill like this, and why, and why does the voice of the people that is saying this bill is just going to bring broken windows policing more to the community more to the community in a way that is going to affect the community more than better the community. But, you know, and I mean, the whole board could speak about the 1,000 cops and what they think about it as well.
Okay. Before we get, I just want to announce a question from the Queen, and that's what we'll take as our third question. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Christina Chase. I guess my question is, how can we have discussions around police accountability while not losing the fervor in the social movement? Because my theory is new reforms will occur out of this talk around police accountability, and we'll lose that that momentum in our social movement, which I just feel like any talk around police accountability is not the answer. So how do we keep that momentum while, I guess, accepting these reforms, but not forgetting that police in general are the problem, not just the accountability and et cetera. So,
So if we can address that question first from roughly Monifa or Erica, and then we'll get into the direct questions, okay?
Sure. You know, if I had all the answers, we would not be here. But I think that it's a both and it's a difficult conversation to keep going because there is an immediacy. There are changes that must absolutely happen right now. You know, if someone's like, every time my child goes to school, he's being stopped and frisked, that has to stop now. Like, we have to get together and we have to say, this policy, this practice must end, and those are reform measures, you know. At the same time, we have to keep pushing the fact that we must dismantle the whole, you know, the whole system that is built on a militarized concept of safe communities, right? So that's difficult. Like, you really can't walk into a room full of folks where, you know, crime is up, or people don't feel safe. There's danger lurking, and just, you know, kind of have this long-term vision conversation. But we have to figure out a way to integrate those conversations. How do we marry those conversations? I think it comes through telling stories. I think it comes through looking at other models that exist maybe in other parts of the country, but also in other parts of the world, and bringing those examples into these spaces. And we're really the ones, like, you know, it's not just up here, it's everybody in this room. We have to carry out this notion that places, that there's nothing inherently pathological about Black and brown people, that they need to have like a 4-to-1 police ratio. And that's, you know, there's not even a teacher-student ratio like that in the classroom. Right? So we have to really accept that personally, because I think a lot of us don't. I mean, we intellectually feel that way, but then we still think that the community needs to be militarized, right? To be safe. So if we can start to work on ourselves, push that piece out, and really carry this idea that we believe in people and systems are broken and our people are broken, and push that along with the reforms, I'm optimistic. I think we can get there. But I, for a long time, only wanted to talk about no more prisons, no more police. And that just doesn't work when someone's child isn't safe, when someone doesn't feel safe. You know, they need some stuff now. How do we bring those together? It's very complicated, and it's going to look different depending on where you are. If you're working in the university, if you're in a community like Bed-Stuy where I live, it's going to look different from if you're doing it out in South Jamaica, Queens, right? So, but that's an important piece. Link it, bring it together.
Erica, you want to answer that?
I agree with what Monifa said. It's basically the accountability for, like, to keep the conversation going. It's part of every person to be out there, you know, just not only talking about police, but talking about the system. Because you gotta think about it. What have them cops out there? The policies, the rules, the command from, you know, it goes topper. It goes higher than just, you know, saying, oh well, this police officer is bad. You know, you have to look at, you know, what caused them to be on that corner that day. You know, it's quotas out there. There's a certain amount of arrests they have to, you know, bring in. Prisons has, you know, a certain amount of people that they have to bring in a year in order to get funding. So, you know, it's a hard thing to keep the conversation going. It's a hard thing, but, you know, we as people need to get together and link, you know, these problems together and come and talk. That's
You want to do that one first?
Yeah, please.
So the question around 1,000 cops for me, it's never been either or. And I've been consistent from the time that I got elected. I also take my job as council member very, very seriously. I kind of view things different when I was 25 and thinking one way, and now that I'm 38 and a council member. And I try to play checkers, not chess, with a lot of things. And so whenever, and it's not a bill, it's actually a proposal. Whenever something comes before me, I try to weigh out what is the right thing to do. And so, first of all, it's not either or. So I firmly believe that we cannot solve this problem with just police. That doesn't mean that I don't think police are necessary for law enforcement. The other one is, people disagree with me. I don't think 1,000 cops either way. You have the 7th largest army in the world. It's 34,000 or 35,000. Bring it to 36, bring it to 34. I don't think you solve the problem. The problem is not going to be solved if you take away 1,000. I don't personally think the problem gets worse if you add 1,000, because the problem is not necessarily with the number in this case, but with the ethos of how people are policed. Now, if someone said that we want to add 10,000 more cops, that would be a different story. But 1,000 cops, for me, did a few things. One, any meeting I've ever been to, from the first time I got elected, my constituents asked for additional police officers. Of course, that's because they've been trained to believe that this is the best way to keep them safe. We all know they also need other things. So I push for those other things, but I've always asked for additional cops in response to my constituents. That's every meeting, not just some meetings, all meetings, that's what's asked for. Two, for me, it takes away an excuse that I've heard for 2 terms. When I've talked about stop, question, and frisk and the abuses of it, they would say, we don't have enough police, that's why they're doing what I thought was lazy policing. We don't have enough resources. We questioned the commissioner on vertical patrols in the public housing. Of course, they don't do vertical patrols of any other agency. If they did have an electrician doing vertical patrol, they might have caught the light that was out before a guy girl was killed. But be that as may, they have vertical patrols of police officers. And there was a problem with freshman police officers, rookie officers doing those vertical patrols together. We were told that policy was going to change. Then a Kai Gurley was shot. And we said, what the hell happened? You said that we were going to change that policy. They said we didn't have enough resources to do the changing as quickly as possible. When it comes to community policing, unfortunately that term is being co-opted in a way that is very unfortunate. And people are talking about community policing, and it's really not that. So they're going to co-opt it, and they're going to have the same results because wouldn't have fixed the system. That's another discussion. Community policing I'm talking about, unfortunately, is not what I see yet. But when we talk about what I would like to see, again, they talk about resources. And so my thing is, okay, if that's what it is, I have no problem with supporting the 1,000 officers. Primarily, I know it's a principle thing, but primarily, I don't think it hurts. Just like taking away 1,000 is not going to fix it. It's just the system is broken, and there's so many. That's about 2% or less of additional officers in a large agency. And if that takes away that excuse, so be it. But what's interesting is they won't even accept offer of the 1,000 new officers. And so my thing is, well, if that's the excuse that you're using, and we're offering you this, and you still won't accept it, you're BSing. Don't, and I said this the last police hearing we had, and I'm going to say it again when the commissioner comes, I don't want to hear the issue of resources again as excuses for why you can't police the way, why you can't police one community the same way you police all communities. And so that, for me, is the reason why I continue to support that, much to the consternation of my police reform friends. But they do have good thinking on it. And I, too, believe that we have to fund all these other agencies as well. We can't just fund this. But for me, it's never been an either or, and it's not now.
Thanks, Councilman.
Dang, no claps.
You don't want 1,000 more cops.
Brother gave me two questions.
Right.
The organization has been doing a lot of work. We're also part of what they call the Grand Council of Guardians, which is the Guardians Association, different Guardians Association in New York City. We work with a lot of civil rights, so we work with the NAACP, we work with the Urban League. We work in the community. We have National Black Police Association started the what do you do when you stop by the police. We changed it to how do you survive police confrontation, because we thought that it was more appropriate to teaching children how they survive when they're stopped by the police, instead of what you know, but how do you survive, how do you go home, how do you know your child's in a gang, are you a victim of domestic violence. We do mentoring. We continue to try to build that bridge. One of the problems is the younger black officers. You got to understand, when you come out of the police academy, you have to be debriefed, because you're putting to the culture of policing, no matter what color you are. It is a culture. It is a culture based on white supremacy. I'm just keeping it real. So when officers come out, especially officers of color, Latino or black, they're focused on that. Our organizations try to get them back to what they're there for, being more community based. They say, well, we're all blue. No, I'm black, but and I wear a blue uniform. Let's get that clear. So we try to get all that. The media does not put us on TV, because when you have a black commissioner or a black precinct commander talking proper and explaining the way the policing system is with the black community, they don't want that. They hardly put positive black men on TV. So you think they're going to put a black cop or a black law enforcement officer really calling Lynch out, really calling Bratton out? That's not going to happen. I've gotten more calls from Belgium, Russia, the United Kingdom, Al Jazeera News. I'm on there all the time. But I never get called at MSNBC or CNN or Channel 7 or anything like that. So it's the perception. It goes back to the perception, and it also goes back to obtaining what? Power? We don't have any media companies to tell our story. I'm gonna leave that there, because that's another panel.
Thank you. Back and clap. That's cool.
Yeah.
We're gonna hear from you. Sister, did you have a question too? Yeah, okay, so we're gonna hear from you, my two sisters and you, and then we're gonna wrap up with those questions.
Who do you want to go first?
We're gonna go
You
to
can
my
go,
sister.
I don't care. Go ahead.
No, we're gonna go with you first. We're gonna go with you first.
Okay, I have two questions, and I apologize in advance if they seem a little defeatist. The first one is, Damon, you talked about how we have phones now, that nothing's really changed except for the fact that we have the ability to watch it on TV and watch it on social media and Facebook and literally watch it at our fingertips. We asked for witnesses when Trayvon Martin got shot down. We had witnesses for Michael Brown, and then we asked for video footage, and nothing happened with Eric Garner, still. So how do we fight that? And how do we keep that momentum going, knowing that our national attention span is like this big? The second part is, I was one of the ones out there on the streets shouting Black Lives Matter, but I feel a lot of the time that it actually should be changed to hashtag Black Male Lives Matter. I don't hear anything about the women who have lost their lives at the hands of police, and they have happened, and they continue to happen, and I can't even name them. So what are you guys doing, you four, and everyone else in here, to change that, to include women in that conversation?
Thank you, sister. Thank you. Sister, were you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to know your question first, and then we'll
Oh, so in places like Newark, where you see the whole communities, groups, activist groups, you see the students, the teachers, the principals, they're like backlashing against the state of New Jersey, as well as the superintendent of Newark in regards to education, but it goes across the platform, whether it's to mass incarceration or prison reforms, or safety on our streets, just the potholes that are present in our neighborhoods. My question is, how can we make our voices heard, because they're not being heard even when there are these forces of activism, etc. in our neighborhood, they're not being heard, and what can we do to actually get stuff done instead of sitting there continuously complaining and saying we need something done, but nothing is actually being done, and that's my problem. And I want to know, what can we do not to be heard and to actually have stuff done by our legislators?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to say, millions of people saw Eric Garner murdered. by the unarmed man on their phones, social media. There didn't need to be a grand jury to come up with the evidence whether it was sufficient to prosecute him. The only person that I know of who's faced charges was the photographer. And this is saying something right there. And the question that I have is, why is this happen over and over and over again?
For the next generation. And I think if we can get our mind wrapped around that, then it becomes a little easier. But I mean, it was a great point that he made about the camera, the phone, because that's exactly what happened for years. I mean, nobody believed what was happening in Selma until it got into everybody's living room. And that's exactly what happened here. Nobody, we knew what was going on, this was happening to us, but nobody believed until they saw it on video, or I should say, nobody reacted until they saw it on video.
I can clap around that if you want to. I'm sorry.
No problem.
If you could jump in on the piece around what's called how do we prioritize, saying the impact on women, especially since I alluded to it earlier. A lot of times, we see a lot of our sisters out there on the streets, but they're not only the ones who are being killed, but also the power of the women out there is also being marginalized. If you wouldn't mind speaking to that. My fault.
Yeah, no, it's difficult, it's difficult being a woman in this movement. It's difficult being a woman in our community, in the streets. There's police brutality in the street, there's sexual harassment, there's marginalization within our movement. And it becomes, it can become very overwhelming. Bell Hooks wrote that all men are black, all women are white. So in addition to it being difficult to be a woman in all this, being a black woman is its own special kind of just hard overwhelmingness. And how do we deal with that? How do we uplift these voices? One is that there are a fierce number of women activists on the front lines in Ferguson, on social media, writers, young women of color who are forcing us to have the conversations about Ayanna Jones, about all of the women Chantel Davis, Kayam Livingston, and so we're able through our own media, using social media, create our own media around these cases, and that has to continue and that has to grow. But we also have to make sure that we look at just the intersections, the intersectionality of all the work that we're doing, and that there's no liberation of half of a community. We're not going to get anywhere, just freeing black men. We exist together, we live together. We have to address the issues that impact women and girls. It's a very complicated discussion. There was a lot that came out when the White House put out this the task, My Brother's Keeper. And I think women all over, black women, kind of fell on different sides of that. We have to continue those conversations and continue to push the issue. And my biggest answer to that is please don't be, don't be defeated. I mean, one of the things you say, I hate to be the one that sounds defeated or demoralized. Be optimistic, because when we really look back at the gains that we have made, women were central to all of that.
That's right.
I loved the movie Selma, but I was like, wow, it was, you didn't even see Ella Baker, like her name wasn't even said, right? How could any of this happen without an Ella Baker? It couldn't have, and the many women before her and the many women after her. So this is not a new phenomenon. I talked to my sister's elders about how we're going to deal with this and move forward, but we definitely have to keep the faith that, one, we're going to be able to win this, that we are a critical part of this movement, and that our women and girls are just as valuable. And there's no, when there becomes this hierarchy and who's more dehumanized, black men or black women, we don't want to have that, that fight. No one wants to win that fight. But it's so funny because you can go to the bar and it's almost like it's a contest. No, we got it first. No, nobody got it like the black man. No, it's like this contest, and it's just, we exist together.
That's right.
And we know that. And we know that, and we have to do better.
I just wanted to check in with folks, at least on the program. They said that we were supposed to be ending by 5:15, but I didn't want to cut it off, one, without closing remarks, but even more important, without having the last of the questions spoken to. So are people okay with us staying an extra 10 minutes? I want to make sure that we're valuing your time. Can we do that?
Yeah.
We can do that?
Yeah.
Good, man. Making it so easy for us. All right, so just to kind of finish up and kind of encapsulate the last of the two questions where we talked about how do we make sure, you know what I'm saying, that the sister, who's on our phone right now, sorry. So how do we make sure that, you know what I'm saying, that we continue to make our voices heard? And I know that there were a lot of powerful statements that came out of that in each of the responses. But we also talked about, you know, what is the progress on the anti-profiling bill? And Jonathan, you had a point about, can you mention the other piece again?
Yeah. April 14th is going to be a national day, no business as usual, shut it down around stop murder by the police. And then on the 13th at high schools and the 14th all around Harlem are patrols with whistles, blowing the whistles up to anybody fly up and hand them out.
Okay. All right, yeah, so if we can jump in there, and then we're going to end around closing remarks with some calls to action, okay? So, speakers, jump in, try to keep it succinct.
I'll just keep it quick, and I think I'll tie into the sister's question about the videotape and why we have to, as young people, and I'm in my mid-40s, a lot of y'all are younger than me, countries, leaderships and dictators of countries has fell because of the youth. It's your time now to step up. This movement has been co-opted by leaders that say that they're civil rights leaders or they're black leaders. It has been co-opted. And that's why it will move up and then it will die down. You know? Why are we marching in D.C.? We should be marching in Albany because it's the governor that signs the bill. Think about that. So all our energy is in D.C. And that's why it goes up and it goes down. And we're setting the bar too low. See, the governor says, oh, I'm going to have an independent special prosecutor. Now everybody's happy. No, if we're going to protest, we're going to protest with an agenda. This is what we want. And what we should request is police crimes. We want them to go to jail. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. See, when we look at the Gardner case, he violated policy, which they admit, but it wasn't a crime. So now we want, when you violate policy, to be a crime. That's what we should be marching for. And we should be up in Albany and putting pressure on Governor Cuomo. When the young kids were killed in Sandy Hook, what was that, Connecticut? The man went in and shot all the kids, right? New York State legislator passed the toughest gun law in the United States within 3 months of that killing. How long has her father been killed? How long has black men, brown men, Latino men being killed in New York City and they haven't passed that piece of legislation? See, we're setting the bar too low when we march. We need to set it high and stop allowing people to co-opt this movement. You know, because they claim Martin Luther King, and if Martin Luther King was alive today, he wouldn't even be around then. Thank you.
Okay, and women.
That's what I said, and women.
That was you yelling, and women.
And women, I'm sorry. And women.
In my closing remarks, I'm gonna keep it brief, and I'm gonna touch on the question about how basically the whole world watched as Eric Garner was killed. It was a video, your phone, your TV, you can see it, and we asked the question, why? And many of us who are parents, our kids also asked, they're like, why? How could this happen, right? And the painful answer really speaks to the dehumanization of black and brown bodies. When you see the the image of Mike Brown. We didn't see him shot, but what we do have is the long, detailed 4 hours in which he was allowed to lay on the ground and bleed out like roadkill. No one with power on that day who could have at least changed that part saw Mike Brown as a human being on the level of their child. Because no one with power on that day would have allowed their child to lay out, bleed out for 4 hours on the ground in the hot sun, right? So that's the painful reality, is the dehumanization of black and brown bodies. So the frustration comes when you're like, isn't this the law? Isn't this the policy? Isn't this what's supposed to be? Shouldn't people be outraged? And we're not getting to the real crux of the problem, which is the white supremacy and which is the fear of black and brown bodies and the dehumanization of black and brown bodies. Because if you don't see me as another human being, I'm not going to be afforded the empathy that you give to a human being. So that was my answer to your question. In my brief closing, I wanted to say that there's no better. No, I'll come back to it.
The quick answer, where'd he go? Oh, the quick answer for me is what I kind of said at the beginning. It's the birth defect of this country. We keep feeling the effects of it, of slavery, of how this country was made for certain people. And I think also, sometimes you fall into what's called false consciousness. Some of us sometimes believe this foolishness that we see. We may make an excuse. Well, maybe you shouldn't have done this. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. I guess it's a way, a survival tactic. I guess self-defense. I don't know what it is, but I know it's based on. We try to say, "Oh, that's not American." That's what it actually is. America is very racist. America is sexist. America is elitist. That is very American. But what gives me some hope also as American are people pushing back on that construct. People fighting back, and I'm proud to see that happen. But I don't really have a good answer other than that of why it keeps happening over and over again. I mean, we know why it keeps happening over and over again, and it's I think that's point period for that question. Somebody asked about the Community Safety Act. I said then, and I'll say now, even when we deal with the broken windows and we pass the right to know why. I was saying then that that's not going to solve the problem. I said it back then. So when we deal with the issue of stop, question, and frisk, the problem wasn't going to be solved. I think there has been some changes. The numbers have dropped, but the statistics of who is still getting stopped and the veracity of who's feeling the brunt of police brutality is still the same. The Inspector General is not as strong as we wanted it to be, because we didn't have the power to make it as powerful as we wanted to. But I think he's come up with some reports that I think are good, and hopefully he'll come up with some more. So I think there has been some change, but it's been incremental. And when we pass the Right to Know Act, I think again it will be incremental. But it's not a silver bullet for lack of a better word that's going to solve this. That's going to solve it.
Well, there's no really an answer to what happened to what's being done. Like in my father's case, I'm still fighting. Why it keep on happening? Just like he said, it's like a systematic thing. This country is built on racism. But I think to implant change, specifically in my father's case, and nothing has been done. The main thing that I'm trying to get right now is for transparency, more transparency in the courts. So when situations like this happen or has happened after my father, that we can know what was exactly said or presented to the grand jury. Now, I think everything in my father's case was just corrupt. Just straight like that. Police reports that I pulled up online, they shouldn't even have the right to do things like that. I don't know if you've seen it, but it was basically a cover-up. And for a supervisor to sign off on the cover-up, that was totally like what's going on. Like this is what we have to break down on, like who actually has the power, who actually has control over these police officers, for them to actually write down on paper that totally different from what people seen in the video. So, you know, it's more, it's bigger than just that issue. Just, you know, just the cop being on the corner messing with my dad for something as small as loose cigarettes. I mean, so we have to look at the broader problem, and we have to see who's right to hold these cops accountable. Because obviously it's not the man. Obviously it's not Commissioner Bragg. So who can really have authority over these police? So, yeah.
Thank you. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Panelists, as we close, can you just offer up one clear opportunity for how folks can get involved in supporting the work around police accountability?
Well, right now I started my own website, thegardnerwayfoundation.com. On Twitter, Erica Gardner, official Erica Gardner, Facebook, and basically I just promote my weekly rallies at the Step Now and Ferry at 6 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday, and you know, just spread the word. I ask people, you know, if you can't come on one day, come the next day, and if you can't come that week, come the next week, because I'm always out there.
Just a couple things. I'll be very quick. Because there's two things that I'm hoping that can change the trajectory of some of these conversations. Because whenever we start talking about systematic racism, I think one of the problems, there's two problems. One, people believe someone's calling them a racist, which has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. And so I think if people can understand that you can not be a racist and then still have systemic racism in this place that we have, I think that would help the conversation go a little smoother, because people feel offended when that it's just the truth. And the second is between the systematic racism and individual responsibility. People think you're trying to prevent people from being responsible for their actions. When those two things intersect, they're not one or the other. And so my thing is, I'm hoping as we talk, those two things can change somehow. People will view them a little differently. As for police accountability, there's a bunch of things you can do. One, support the Right to Know Act, support the chokehold bill, put pressure on me and my colleagues in the city council to have hearings on those bills. And I would say, I don't know how many people go to the community, police precinct community meeting, but you need to go to those, and you need to make noise and talk about how you as a community member want to be policed. And I think we said it here, but it's not listened to. We should have a voice in how we're policed and what we want police to concentrate on and not concentrate on. It is done in other communities. And lastly, I think we're probably preaching to a lot of the choir. But does everybody know someone who is not here but probably should have been here? Just raise your hand when you think of that person. If you can just call him or her after this meeting and tell them something that you heard here that might help change their mind a little bit, that would be great, because the work is really between these panels. If we don't do anything different for the next panel, then we won't really change it. Thank you.
There's currently no national data collection on police killings, like, you know, how many people get killed by the police every day. So the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, we did our own reports called Every 28 Hours. So if you go to mxgm.org for the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement and download that report and share it far and wide. Initially when we did the report, it was every 32 hours, and then there was a flurry of killings, and we had to upgrade that report, and so we'll probably have to update it again. But if you are, you know, if you're in a university or research setting, that type of data, that type of information is very important. The second website where you can get involved is changethenypd.org. That's the website for Communities United for Police Reform. It's a 60 organization coalition here in New York City. And there are many different campaigns that you can plug into from that website. And last but not least, do cop watch. When we talked about doing cop watch back in the 90s, it was like, you know, we actually had to get cameras that you hold up and had the really high aids. We're talking about big phones. They were big cameras. But now, really, anyone can do cop watch, and we wouldn't even know of Eric Garner's story had not someone been doing cop watch. So I encourage us to all continue to do that and to continue to highlight these stories to the world, because that's an important tool.
We have a website called BLEAUSA.org. We give a lot of information from black law enforcement perspective, law enforcement activism perspective, different articles. We have different pamphlets. All our pamphlets, what we do in community, what we do in the community is up on the website. I'm also the publisher of blackwestchester.com, which is an online magazine, and which we give a different perspective on what's going on within New York City, the country, and the rest of the world. I also have a radio show on In the Mix, 2X's, radio.com every Sunday. It's called People Before Politics, where we discuss issues in the community, like police criminality, oversight, and different other issues. One thing I definitely would like to say that we must remember in 1857, Justice B. Taney, in the Dred Scott decision, he made a statement in his decision: blacks had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. Not one Supreme Court justice had disagreed with that yet. So we must understand our position and our position in this world, and even our position in the Supreme Court, because the legislation that has followed has showed that we are not seeing any justice. We must reevaluate our position with the political parties. Reevaluate, maybe leave the political party if they're not going to pass proper legislation. It's about legislation. And if we can't find good elected officials like Councilman Williams, and like Councilman Williams said, you know, the Democrats, you don't know what's going on. Well, maybe we need to leave the party, and maybe we need to not vote for them. And maybe they will start passing legislation like the brother Councilman is speaking of, so we can have what we call justice. Because until we have proper legislation that's going to cause oversight and cause accountability and make police accountable for their actions, they will just walk away. They will definitely just walk away, especially at the DA's office. We need to reevaluate our relationship with these DA's office because they're too close. And look, and please read the report from the president. I don't think it's worth the paper that it's written on, unfortunately. It's all jigmarole. It's nothing to saying that we're going to pass laws and we're going to pass legislation on holding them accountable. They kick everything back to the police management, back to the people that's holding the fort and keeping the culture up. So please, be involved, and when November comes around, vote.
Vote.
Please vote.
Yes.
That's how we're going to change it.
So, round of applause to our speakers. Keep it going for yourselves. Keep watching that one. Clap for yourself too. That's cool. That's cool. Two things just to remember
We
this
get a round
month.
of applause for the moderator?
Yes, moderator.
There's two things to remember. This Monday coming up is the anniversary of the killing of Kimani Gray. We need to stop the killing of our young people. Please learn about his story. If you can make it out there to Brooklyn, please support. If you can't, there's other ways that you can support. Next Thursday on March 12th, Ramsey Order, you know what I'm saying, who Manifa alluded to, the brother who actually showed a lot of courage, you know what I'm saying, and being there and being able to film for Eric Garner, is still actively, you know what I'm saying, being targeted. His next court date is coming up in Staten Island Courthouse, right? If you can't make it, find out about his story and share it, all right? You are loved and appreciated.